And I just have a question about disability. Why is the process that you apply for Social Security disability and automatically denied? Have to hire an attorney? Why? Is there anything?
It's because you all can't hear her question. She's talking about Social Security disability. It feels like all people are automatically denied. You have to hire a lawyer. You have to go through a long process. It's because they want to make it as hard as they can for you.
Yeah.
That's why. It's not the same reason insurance companies deny claims. You know, because they just deny them automatically. You deny them 3 or 4 times, and they hope people will go away. That's what happens. And that has to change. The President of the United States can do something about that. Because the President, and I will do something about it. To answer your question. It's the same problem. It's a bureaucratic maze and bureaucratic barriers to prevent people from getting what they're entitled to under the law. And that bureaucracy is equivalent to denying them their rights. That's what happens. And that has to be changed. It will be changed when I'm president, I can tell you that.
I'd like to know your stand on immigration.
Yes, ma'am. She's asking if you couldn't hear about immigration. There are several things. First of all, you know, I mentioned earlier that NAFTA, these CAFTA, these trade deals were, remember what we were promised when those deals came along? We were promised they were going to create jobs in America, and they were going to improve economic conditions in places like Mexico, so there'd be no reason for them to immigrate to America. Right. Cost us millions of jobs, done nothing to improve economic conditions in Mexico. So the starting place is America needs to have both a trade policy and a foreign policy that improves economic conditions in other places in the world, all for the purpose of creating conditions where people live that they can sustain themselves, that they don't have a reason, an overwhelming reason to try to come into the United States. That sort of gets to the underlying issue. Beyond that, we need to secure our border. Our border is a mess. It can't be sustained the way it is now. Elizabeth tells us a great story about, she describes what happens, I'll let her tell it, but she describes what happens when you go into a Blockbuster. You all been in a Blockbuster before? You know, you go in a Blockbuster and you don't see anybody, you always hear that voice that says, "Welcome to Blockbuster." So Elizabeth says if we can figure out when somebody's coming into Blockbuster, we ought to be able to figure out when somebody's coming into the United States of America. And then she added, the other day she heard me tell her story, and she added to that, and if we can't figure it out, why don't we ask Blockbuster? In all seriousness, there's technology available that we're not taking advantage of and provide much more security on our southern border. I'd have more border patrol. I do not favor building a fence all the way across the southern border. I think that's nutty. I think there might be some isolated places that fencing would do some good. I think we ought to be much harder on employers that are violating the law. And then the most difficult question, and the one that creates all the divisiveness, is what do you do about the people who came here and are undocumented? Now, I'm not for amnesty, but I am for a path to earn citizenship. And that means, from my perspective, that there are a couple of things they ought to have to do if they want to become American citizens. One, pay a fine if they came here illegally. And the other, which is a little more controversial, is second, if they want to become an American citizen, they should learn to speak English. Those are the things that I would do. Now, they're telling me to stop. And I want to make sure that I call at least one young person. It's right here. You're it. You just yell it, and I'll say it back.
Could you speak a little bit about environmentally sustainable economic development and alternative energy?
I will. He's asking about environmentally sustainable economic development and alternative energy. My view is that Al Gore's got it completely right, that we have a crisis in the world with global warming, and America has got to be leading very aggressively on this issue. What I would do is, well, first of all, let's talk about the problem. We're the worst polluter on the planet. We put out 25% of the world's greenhouse gases. We're only 4% of the world's population. We use 22 million barrels of oil a day. So what do we do to change that? We have no credibility with the rest of the world in trying to fashion a global solution. We should have a cap on carbon emissions in America. The cap ought to come down every year. We ought to reduce our carbon emissions by at least 80% by the year 2050. We may need to do more, But that's today what the scientific consensus is on the aggressive end. And then below the cap, we ought to make polluters pay. And they ought to have to pay to get a permit. And if they get a permit, and they pay for it, that money, which should be at least $30 billion, should be invested in clean, renewable sources of energy. Wind, solar, cellulose-based biofuel. Now let me say, since we're getting close, there are some actual differences between the Democrats on this. Unlike Senator Clinton and Senator Obama, I do not, I mean, you could be on either side of this, but you deserve to know the differences. I do not favor building more nuclear power plants.